Okay. So it says I'm not able to connect to the chat. So YouTube is kind of up to its own thing again. I'm going to put up the number for the conference call. And we're doing math, so we're going to need the conference call number anyway. Who's the other participants? Okay, we got 3 people on here so far. All right, so I'm going to be reaching out to some other people to come and join us. I'm going to put the conference call number up. Today, we're going to be talking about solving one-step inequalities and multi-step inequalities and graphing them. So if you had me before, when I took over for the last instructor, we started talking about inequalities, so you should be familiar with what those are. Now we're going to take it to the next step, and we're going to talk about graphing them. Trying to make sure we get as many people on here as possible. Okay. So I'm going to put the number up. This is another reason why I don't like to rely too much on technology. Um, it's not letting me have the chat feature. We're also going to be doing something that's going to be quite complicated today. So I'm going to make sure that we are able to use a live chat to communicate. I'm sorry, use a conference call to communicate. So please join. I can guarantee you there will be questions. Some of the problems may look slightly intimidating. So let's make sure everybody can participate. So if you're watching this, again, please call the conference call. We have 4 people. We were averaging about 10 to 11. Hello, who just joined us?
Good morning, it's Hildy.
Hey, Ildi. Trying to see where everybody else is at. It says I had 5 people, but YouTube is acting weird and it's not showing me who the participants are. So if you're on the video, please call in the conference call number so that we can all be on the same page. My live chat is down and I'm not going to keep playing with it. It's a result of everybody being home on the internet.
I see Diane and Coral on. Mariana.
Okay. Yeah, would you if you have their numbers, or in fact, I think you have their numbers. Would you be able to let them know to join the conference call?
I can text them in the chat. I don't have anybody's number.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my chat's down. I'm gonna start messaging them too.
I can only stay till 10 today because of my son's promotion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, congratulations. I remember we were saying that.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Oh, Diane said she's at work and she can't join the conference call.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so I'm just sending out a couple more messages. The call. Okay. So what about Coral? Did she say?
Yeah, she said hi.
Did you does it show up when I send the hello? Did that show up?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then let me try. Okay. So let me tell them. So I guess I just can't see when you guys message.
Paul said I'm going to join in a bit.
Hello, who just joined us?
Hi, good morning. This is Maria Hernandez.
Oh,
Mariana.
all right, Mariana. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, I'm gonna see. I just want to get as many people on here as we can, and then I'm probably gonna have Mike start calling some of the students that are not here. Okay.
Coral said she can't join right now because her partner's sleeping and she can't be on the phone.
Okay. Are you joining us? Is Andre there?
No, I don't see Andre. Diane's at work and Coral can't talk right now, and that's the Mariana is here on the phone with us, so that's 4 of us.
Okay.
That's all.
Perfect. Let me. Somebody else just joined. Who is this?
It's me, Bismarck.
All right.
I'm sorry, I was busy.
That's all right. I definitely understand. I'm just as busy. I'm in the middle of buying a house and buying another house, should I say, and five kids, and yeah, definitely understand. I'm gonna send out a few more messages, and then we'll go ahead and get started. While we're doing that, did everybody get a chance to fill out the attendance?
Yes. Oh, not yet.
And yeah, and the attendance is honestly mostly to make you guys look good because I already know who shows up to class. It's the same names. This is just mostly so that you get credit with the navigators, so the advisors that they see us, so they see you. Okay, so we'll have Alma joining us here shortly. We'll get started. So we're still at 5. Did everybody get a chance to do some of the practice problems?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Did everybody get a chance to do the practice problems?
I watched the video.
Okay,
I didn't do it.
perfect. Someone else just joined? Okay. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started, and then I'll reach out to Mike to have him call some of the other students. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna say is that my goal, so that we have the upmost data, up to date data, is to have a quiz every Friday. So that quiz is gonna be over everything we've done during the week and a couple of things we're gonna do down the road, so that I know how well we've mastered everything. So every Thursday we would end up having a quiz, and it would be a review of pretty much everything we've done in the week and then some. So like with math, we're literally going standard by standard. So the next standard after equations and word problems is inequalities. So we moved on to that. But again, I really want everybody to test. I want everybody to do well. So I'm going to throw in some standards on those quizzes that we have not covered yet, just to see how comfortable we are, so we can really hit everything that we need. Math is where we need to keep a very high pace because there's several standards. And unlike reading, if you don't get one part of it, you can't move on to the other. And we might even have to do some reviewing. So be on the lookout for that. We're talking about inequalities. You're going to see that to solve inequalities, it's the same thing as solving any other equation. The biggest difference is going to be graphing and understanding what the argument is, like what they're trying to do with the inequality. Um, some of this, just because of the sake of time, I'm not going to give you the full blown mathematical reasoning for things, like the numeracy behind some of it, just because we don't have time. All right. So again, if you're watching from home and you can join the conference call, I highly recommend it because I guarantee you there's going to be questions. All right. Before we get started, any questions?
No.
Okay. So an inequality is a statement that connects two unequal expressions. Okay. So, and I'm sure you've seen these before, the greater than, the less than, right? We're going to be using these. The easiest, most realistic way that I like to think of inequalities is like a budget, right? So if you want to live, let's say you want to move out to California, you want to live in Los Angeles, and you're wondering between the state taxes, county tax, city tax, and everything else, if you could afford it, you might set up a problem where you have inequalities and variables. So this is, I think, the best way to think about variables. So I gave you the literal definition. Now I'm going to give you a more practical way to think of it. So let's say I want to live in, I don't know, somewhere in California that's expensive, Beverly Hills, right? And I know that I can't live there for anything less than, let's just say, $2,000 a month. This is why we have inequalities in math. Write that up here. Everybody can see. $2,000 a month, right? Let's get a color that stands out a little bit more. So if I wanted to live there for $2,000 a month, I have to consider. So now here, if that's the bare minimum, then all of my expenses either has to equal this, right, or be less than this amount. This is why we had this symbol in math, right? Everything either has to be equal to $2,000 because that's what the budget is, or it has to be less, right? Now I may have to factor things in like rent, right, or maybe a water bill. Okay, let's say that I'm paying my rent and I'm paying the rent for somebody else, or let's say like my rent is going to be 2 times a month because maybe there's like an HOA fee and the rent or whatever. So I could say whatever the rent's going to be, I know I'm going to pay it twice. Whatever the water bill is, I know I'm paying it once a month. But I know that the rent plus the water bill and all my other expenses, which I could use several variables to do that, all of that has to be equal to $2,000 or less than $2,000. That's why we have inequalities. In fact, when we solve these, I'm going to show you how to put it on a graph so you can tell what will work. Now, this will be obvious to you how much these are. You could probably use algebraic thinking. You could look at this and determine that this has to have a certain value or this has to have a certain value so it doesn't go over the 2,000. It's the same thing. Only thing that we're going to do to make it more complicated, we're going to throw in variables. We're going to throw in fractions, decimals, things like that. But the concept here is still the same, right? Budget has to be $2,000 or less, right? So everything, all your expenses has to be in that equation. That's the real world way to think about inequalities. Questions so far? Questions.
No question. No.
All right. Who just joined us? Is that Andre? Or so? Okay, perfect.
Sorry, a little bit late.
Oh, that's okay. I like to know so that way I can make sure everybody gets credit. I'm definitely pleased that everybody's here. Okay, so I'm going to put up a sample equation, and the goal is going to be to solve it. This is what we're going to do for the rest of the problems, and then we're going to talk about how to graph it. Then we're going to add in multiple inequalities, and then we're still going to graph it. Okay, so let's look at a sample problem such as 3x plus 2 is less than 8. Now, treat the inequality just the same way you would treat the treat the inequality just the same way you would treat the equal sign as far as solving it. If this was an equal sign, I know everybody could smoke it. Everybody could go through and you'd be able to figure out the value of the number so that you make it true. So what we're going to do, okay, so my YouTube is completely down. Okay, so what we're going to do now is the same thing we would do anywhere else. So since we have the conference call, I need somebody to walk me through how I would solve for X. I need to figure out what X is so that this statement is true. What's going to be my next step?
We need to eliminate the number 2.
Good. How are we going to do that?
So we're gonna minus 2 from both sides. So it's gonna cancel out. Who's gonna be canceled out on the left? It's gonna be 6. 6?
3.
Am I right?
Yep. 3x is less than 6. What do we do from here? Now you're killing it. And again, if you're participating, you're speaking up, then you know what you're doing is right. I can follow your thought process. You're going to be in a much better position to pass. If you don't speak up, you're not participating, then I can't help you, and you don't know if your method is right or wrong. So
we're going to divide both sides by 3.
Yep. And now we have the variable isolated on its own. So now we know that x has to be less than 2. Okay. Question so far on that?
No question.
Okay. So if we thought about this as, let's say, another real world problem, you only have $8 and let's say you don't know how much the tickets are for a movie, but you have 3 friends coming and you just found $2 on the street. Well, then by doing this, you figured out that with your budget, you have to go to the dollar theater because you can't spend more than $2 on each one of your friends, right? This is a real world example of it. Now, what they ask us to do is to graph it. So we understand the way this works. So what we have to do now is show on a graph the numbers that will work. In the Army, you would use this like for bridges and like holding weight and how many people can be supported in an area and all kinds of things. What I would want everyone at home to walk away with is a couple of things. So we know that x is less than 2. So we're going to create a number line. Right? Now, we're not going to fill in the circle on the graph that we're about to put down because it's the 2 is not part of the answer. All right. If that sounds confusing, I'm going to give you a couple of things to think about. So we need to put this on the graph, right? So we have a typical number line. Sorry, we need to put this on the number line. We are graphing it. So we know that 2 will work, but it has to be any number less than 2 to make the other problem true, right? We know that if we went higher than that, then we would start to go over our budget. What we do is we circle the 2 and we draw an arrow that shows that everything else will work. If you want the mathematical reasoning, real quickly, 2 is not going to be part of that equation. That's why we're not filling it in. Okay. If you want to know which way to go, it goes the same direction as your inequality. All right. So if you want the quick hits, your arrow is always going to go in the same direction as your inequality. Right? Now, if you have an equal to, that means that x has to equal 2. So if you have this symbol here, the equal sign, then we do have to fill in the circle. And it's still going in the same direction. Does that make sense so far?
No question.
No question.
All right. So now we're going to talk about when we flip the symbol. This is going to be another thing where we're just going to talk about pretty much the standard algorithm, meaning following a set of steps simply because we don't have enough time to get into the numerical reasoning.
So was there a solution
Yes.
or any number?
So here, so remember how we talked about that budget, right? Of $8? Remember how we talked about like the budget is $8, and it's kind of an example to help understand, right? So if the budget is $8, we have 3 friends that want to go. We don't know how much we can spend on each of them, but we found $2 on the ground or whatever. Somebody else gave us $2. When we solve this out, we're trying to figure out everything that X can be. Does that make sense? So it's not one solution, it's a range of solutions. So when we found out that X has to be less than 2, what this is saying is that in order for us to do anything, the most amount of money we can spend on our friends is $2 or less. And that's why we graph it to show that 2 or any number below 2 till infinity will make this a true equation. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it can be any number. There's not one particular number.
Correct. It's 2 and every number below 2 until infinity.
Okay.
Make sense?
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah. Now, we know it's not going to be this simple. We're not going to just have one variable. We're not just going to have a continuation of algebraic equations. So the first little switch that we're going to throw in there is when you're dividing or multiplying by a negative number. Whenever you divide or multiply by a negative number across that inequality sign, the inequality sign needs to change. Okay? And here's what I mean by that. So I'm going to write up a sample problem to show you. All right? So let's look at negative 2n minus 5 plus 5 is greater than or equal to 3 plus 5. Okay, so here we can continue to solve it like the way we would solve anything else. But the difference is going to come in when we're dividing. So I'm sorry, I wrote this down. My fault. Got it. So we now know that this has to be simplified, and we have to isolate the variable. Whoever's talking in the background, make sure you press mute on your phone or your device, whatever you're using. So we know we're going to add 5 on both sides.
Mariana, is that Mariana?
Yeah, Mariana, can you push mute on your phone, please? Yeah. So we're going to have negative 2n is greater than or equal to 8. So right here, we have to divide by negative 2. Because we're dividing by negative 2, the inequality sign is going to change. Also notice on all of these equations, we're getting nice, simple whole numbers, right? That's an advantage of not using not being allowed to use a calculator on the test. If you don't have a calculator, then the numbers are more likely going to be nice, simple, whole numbers. If they're allowing you to use a calculator on the test for your high SED GED test C test, they can make the numbers more complicated because you have a calculator, right? So there shouldn't be any real human error if you're putting in the numbers the way they should be calculated, right? So it's another thing to think about. Obviously, at this point, we know the value of n is that it has to be
-4.
correct, -4. Now, because we're dividing by a negative number, we're going to flip the sign. So this sign is going to change. So this sign is now going to change. It's now going to be n is greater than or equal to -4. There's a lot of tricks that are played in math. So when we're dividing negative numbers or multiplying, we're doing the opposite, and that's part of the reason why we can switch it. I want everybody to pass. Don't worry about why the numeracy part of it. Just understand that we have to switch it. So when we get here, yes, go ahead.
Is the negative sign on the right side? We have to flip it too, flip the sign too.
Yeah, it does not matter which way the inequality faces. Anytime you're dividing by a negative number, you have to flip it. You have to flip the sign. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay. So, and then what we do is we can plug that back into the equation, right? So -2 times -4 gives me +8. +8 minus 5 is 3. So that makes it true because 3 is equal to 3. So to make this true, it has to be 3 or any number that is greater than 3 to make this a true statement. I'm sorry, any number that's greater than -4 to make that into a true statement.
Greater or smaller?
Okay, and I know this kind of gets confusing when we're talking about graphing. So to make this true, it has to be less than or equal to -4.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Is that a better way to think of it? That's why the graph kind of helps, because we know that if we do anything else, it's not going to be equal to. So this has to be, all of this has to be greater than or less than or equal to. Sorry. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay. So, because the devil is real and he hates us, there's even more, right? So now we're going to talk about compound inequalities. So we're going to talk about two inequalities that are together, and then we're going to talk about graphing them. Graphing them, I don't think you're going to get too many where you're going to have a compound inequality and they're going to ask you to graph it, but you will see it. It is present. Someone just send me a message. One moment. So we're going to look at a compound inequality. So we're going to have 3x plus 4 is less than 5x, which is going to be less than 16 plus x. Okay, so this is a compound. Now, the way that we solve this is we're going to create two separate problems. Okay, so whatever the equation is between the inequality signs, keep that and create one problem there, one problem here. So I'm going to use some different colors. So if we're looking at this one, I'm going to create a whole problem right here. This is going to be problem 1. Okay, that's going to be problem number 1. Okay, then we're going to create a whole separate problem. Again, using whatever's in between the inequalities as that sign, we're going to create a whole nother problem here. And this is going to be problem number 2. Okay. So I'm going to rewrite all of this as two separate problems. 3x plus 4 is less than 5x. 5x is less than 16 plus x. Questions so far?
No.
Okay. And then from here, we solve it like we would anything else. Perfect. Thank you. And then from here, we solve it like we would anything else. So what's our goal here? What's our goal here? The same thing we do.
Get the variable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what can I do so that the variable's on one side, the whole number's on the other, and I can solve this?
Yes, we're gonna move the
Ooh, I love it. Everyone's talking. I love it. Who wants to start us off on solving it, and then the other person can help?
You can go, Mariana. Go
There you go. Go ahead, Mariana.
Okay. We can eliminate 3x and pass to the other side as a negative.
Okay. Now what?
Now we can
Everything is always the same. Anytime you see these equations, we're always trying to get rid of everything by the variable and get the number by itself. So now that we're here, right, we have 2x.
Yes.
So what are we going to do?
2x, and now we can isolate x and divide in 2.
Good. So we're going to divide by 2. And if we do it on one side,
Not 2 sides.
do it on the other side. So what does x equal? Or not equal, but
So 2 less. X is less.
yep. 2 has to be less than x. Yes. All right. So that's one answer, right? So now we're going to solve the second problem. All right. Who wants to walk us through that? Thank you so much, Mariana.
You're welcome.
Who would like to solve this problem?
Okay, I
Okay.
Okay. The minus I from the both sides.
Minus what? I'm sorry.
X.
5x. Okay. So we're going to subtract 5x from both sides.
No, subtract X.
Okay, subtract x. Okay.
So we get 4X less than 16. Yeah. And the other side.
And then from here, what do we do?
Get 4X less than 16.
Good. So we divide by 4 on each side.
Divide by 4, yeah.
Yeah. So x is less than 4.
Less than 4.
Now, so you might be wondering how we combine both answers, and I'm going to show you how to do that.
Now it means X between 2 and 4.
There we go. And I'm going to show you how to write it out. Notice that we take up a lot of space. So when you're writing out these problems, give yourself as much space as you possibly can. They should give you all the scratch paper in the world, or give you a color graph sheet like that you can write with magic marker or dry erase marker. But notice I always give myself as much space as possible. Try not to cram in the numbers, because that's something else I've seen people do. When they submit their work, everything is together. So this would be written out as 2 is less than x, right? And then x is less than 4. As you're solving these and I put the answer on the board, you may have rearranged these numbers. It really matter. Because I don't want you guys to get confused with the order. If you were to take this on the test and you see that they try to like slip you up by doing something like this, if you're looking at each symbol, it's still the same thing. Right? Now, if you want to make it the lowest number to the highest number, that's a good rule of thumb. I don't see them tricking you with this, but hey, if you solve it and you end up getting this, as long as you know it's the same thing, you'll be fine. All right. And if they try to throw you a little curveball, that might be one way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Questions on that?
No.
Okay.
No question.
Good. So we're ready to start some practice problems. That sounds like a yes to me. Okay. So I'm going to put up a problem. Not only do I want you to solve it, I also want you to graph it. Okay. We're going to solve it and we're going to graph it. Okay. So, and I'm purposely choosing these. As we get more comfortable, they're going to become more complicated. I'm going to throw in a couple of word problems in there, but we kind of already hit that already, but just as a review, because you will get a word problem on everything. So let's look at this problem. 3x minus 7, all of that is greater than 5. I would like you to solve that and graph it. I am going to give you, now these, when you see them on the test, you may get several of them like back to back. So you want to know about how long it takes you to solve these. So I'm just going to put a timer on. I'm going to put a timer on for 5 minutes, and then I just want you to let me know on the conference call when you're ready. Just say ready. And when the last person says ready, I'm going to stop it. And when you say ready before then, Huh?
Which one is the 7? They all look the same.
Oh, sorry. My handwriting sloppy.
Greater than.
Sorry, my handwriting kind of sloppy. I apologize.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah. 3x minus 7. All right. And
Okay.
all of that is
Yeah.
greater than 5. So I'm going to start the timer so we get comfortable with it. Because some of these, when you take the actual test, you may only have a minute on each question. Right? Or you might get to a point in the test where you're trying to finish and you can only maybe give each problem a minute. So we'll talk about some strategies.
Yeah, I'm ready too.
I'm ready.
All right. So I'm going to start the timer now. So go ahead and begin. And when you think you're ready, I'll let you know how much time it took you to solve it. All right. And begin.
Yeah, I can solve this. Just see.
What's that?
Yeah, I can solve it just seeing to.
And did you end up graphing it?
But I don't write in my notebook. I just looking into the problem.
Yeah, because this one too, you have to graph it.
Yeah.
Did you graph it? Because that's part of the test. Like, you remember how I put it on the graph? You have to be able to do that too. Did you graph it as well?
Okay.
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 So I have you clocked in at less than a minute.
I'm done.
I have you clocked in at 1 minute and 9 seconds.
Hello, hi.
What's that?
Hello.
Hello? Someone just joined us?
Yes, Coral.
Oh, okay. Hey, Coral. Were you able to solve this?
Yeah, I already solved it.
Okay. So I have you clocked in at about 1 minute 30. And this is